I saw this advert one day in the Evening Standard for a financial controller for Bell Records. I thought, Bell Records, you know, they were pretty successful. They were just breaking the Bay City Rollers and Shawadi Wadi and Gary Glitter, and they had Partridge Family and David Cassidy and Terry Jacks from America. I thought, this would be fantastic. So I kind of applied, because this is obviously all pre-email and pre-fax. You know, it was a handwritten letter, I think I wrote. And I got a call saying, do you want to come for an interview? So I went to an interview with the accountant called Alan Smith, the guy who was leaving. And then that went okay, and I got called for a second interview with the big boss, Dick Leahy, who was a bit of a legend because he'd signed all these bands, most of these bands anyway, the English ones. And so I had an interview with Dick, and we kind of got on okay, and I obviously wasn't asking for too much money, and he felt I was competent enough to do the job. And he gave me the job, and then he said, after he gave me the job, he said, oh, by the way, I'm leaving. He said, I'm going to start a new company, and I'm taking some of the staff with me. But anyway, of course, I joined Bell Records, which was, I don't know the year, maybe July '74. And I got there, and it was very strange because Dick had left, the head of marketing had left, the head of international had left, the head of production had left. They'd all gone with Dick to start GTO Records, I think it was called. So I remember looking at the accounts the first month I was there. I looked at the accounts to see what they'd done the previous month to get so I could work out the first month I had to do, and they'd made over £100,000 profit. And this is going back, you know, a long time, nearly 30 years, well, more than 30 years, I think. So I thought, it's extraordinary. This handful of people in this quite small office in Charles Street was making all this money. In the third or fourth week there, I think they had something like 9 singles in the top 40. And I thought, this record business, it must be a doddle making all this money, you know, because Dick hadn't paid a lot of money to sign these acts. But the deals that Dick were doing they're clever in one way, but not so clever in the other way, because he was doing lease tape deals. So the company wasn't owning the masters. So he was getting them cheap, which was great because they were becoming successful and making lots of profit. But it meant that after 5 years or something, the rights all reverted. The amazing thing was, a few weeks after I got there, I remember Monday morning, Music Week ringing up and them saying, oh, do you know the new Bay City Rollers album's gone in at #1? And no one had thought to check. Somehow people weren't that on the ball there. Here was a new Bay City Rollers album, it shipped a few thousand, that was all okay. And in those days, for a record album to go in at #1 was quite exceptional, especially it was a debut album by the band, went at #1. So the Rollers thing really took off, and then so every time the band were going to come in, or some of them, like a mini scene when the band arrived. And the funny thing was, I was in a stationery shop round the corner from the Cherry office the other day, and they had these, you know, these things you put on fridge doors, magnets, so you can put notes underneath them. They had one of the Bay City Rollers. And I said to the guy behind the counter, I said, do people really buy these now? This is like 30 years later. He said, yeah, they sell really well, the Bay City Rollers ones. So, you know, it was an extraordinary thing at Bell, because you had the Rollers, you had Gary Glitter, and I guess you know the whole, I don't know if you know, do you know the whole story about Rock and Roll Part 2? That it wasn't even Gary Glitter singing on there. Mike Leander made the record. Rock and Roll Part 2, which was the first hit, was Mike Leander singing. And so and it would take a long time. It wasn't like now, singles either happen or they don't very quickly. It was a real club record, mailed out to clubs. It took a long time. And Bell Records, what they did then was you had these paid plays on Radio Luxembourg. It was all totally legal. It was £20 a play. And they had 2 or 3 a week, so they were really hammering it on that as well. And so when Rock and Roll Part 2 became a hit, they had to find an artist. And that was when they got Paul Gadd, and they changed the name to Gary Glitter, because it came out as Gary Glitter. That's when Gary got involved. But it was based in Mike Leander, the early records. It was the same with Alvin Stardust. My Cuckoo was Pete Shelley singing that. And again, they had to find, because Pete Shelley produced it, not the Pete Shelley from the Buzzcocks, the other Pete Shelley who had a hit with Love Me, Love My Dog, and something else as well. He came up with this Alvin Stardust idea, and again, that was a hit. And they had to go and they found Shane Fenton.